a lot of people have mentioned you on this podcast as well, but nobody really knows the origins of the business, and I think it's been publicly noted a couple of times that you started Kiska on your kitchen table. Can you talk to me a little bit about that time?
Yeah, I did it on the kitchen table as long as my wife allowed me to do that. And then when she kicked me out because our living room turned into a messy office atmosphere, and then I moved out, and then the real story started.
Okay.
But for a couple of months, yes, I started from home, basically.
So Gerald, again, not a lot of, there's been some rumors about what you were doing before. One of the first things I got told was that you were a clay modeler and you got a couple of projects in and you kind of grew it up.
No.
And after doing some research, I've seen that you studied industrial design.
Exactly.
And you worked as a designer at a few places.
Yes. In 1986, I came back to Austria because I moved away from Austria after university for a couple of years, and then in '86 I came back to Austria and I joined Porsche Design. And Porsche has a small studio in Zell am See. It's a 1 hour drive from Salzburg, and there I was for a little bit more than 3 years. And then I got asked by a friend who worked for a company in Salzburg, an electronics company, if I could help them to know a little bit more about watches. You know, Porsche Design is almost in every field, but it's most probably in accessories. And they were together with IWC at the time doing fine watches, and I was one of the designers who worked with IWC, so I knew a little bit about watches.
Okay.
So I had an interest in meeting that company, and they told me that they were planning to do a watch that can open doors. So the first, let me say, the ticket that you do not have to put into a slot. It was on a Wi-Fi. It was a RFID chip that was able to open doors, open gates, whatever. But as they were coming from electronics, they had no idea what the watch was about. So they wanted to know a little bit more who would be able to help them, where would we get components, where could they find straps and glasses and whatever you need. And I had all the contacts and all the addresses. And after that talk, basically, they asked me if I ever thought about making myself independent. And I said, yeah, maybe. Why asking? And then I said, yeah, if you would be interested, we would have an idea. We would give you a 1 year's contract. You could do that project for us, and we would see more need for industrial design in our company. How does that sound? So I went back to my home, invited my wife for dinner, and asked the question how she thinks about. And she said, if I don't let you try, I will always hear that for the rest of my life. So let's give it a go.
Wow. And in this moment, do you obviously accept the contract or the terms, and you establish yourself as an independent. Do you think is there a part of you that thinks I should be looking for other contracts as well on the side to have a more sustainable business?
To be honest, that did not take longer than 1 week to have that context, because as soon as I quit, first of all, Porsche Design asked me if I could work as a freelancer for them, because I was in a big project at the time and they did not want to catch up. So I said, yeah. And then 2 former companies that we worked with, not as a client but as a producer, asked me whether I would have interest in supporting them. So I had maybe 3 weeks after the start, I had 4 clients and just 2 hands. So I went out and asked some former colleagues from university where I knew that they're particularly good and probably would have interest in joining a kind of a startup company. And I asked them, hoping that one of them would say yes. And to my surprise, both of them said yes. And then I was in a difficult situation to choose one friend. And then it was an unbelievable offer, because both of them told me, we are leaving the place where we work anyway. So don't mind. We talk to each other. We would come, the two of us, and after 2-3 months, you decide who's gonna stay and who's gonna leave. So if there's just work for one, let's make it a race.
Wow. And did they both stay?
Yes.
Wow. So in this moment when they come along, how do you envision the whole thing working together? Are you still very much their employer, or is it kind of an amalgamation, or
At the beginning, we were just 3 designers.
Okay, and just trying to get the work done.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And how long does this kind of carry on until you?
Yeah, then we moved. I moved first of all into a slightly bigger office. I asked a friend of mine who was a graphic designer, and he had some empty tables if we could join. But even that was not, let me say, a long-lasting solution, because it was then too dense quickly, and then again, luck is one luck by the other. It's a chain of luck, of lucky situations or opportunities. That friend that brought me to this electronics company had an advertising agency in Salzburg, and he moved out of his studio because it also got a little bit too small. And he asked me if I would want to take over his studio. And I said, wow, it's fairly large. We are 3 people, and this is a studio for, let me say, 7, 8, 9, and difficult to afford. And he said, you know what, we anyway always find clients that we work on together. So therefore, you do not have to pay me rent. As soon as I bring a project that suits you, you do the project and I don't pay you. How about that deal?
Wow.
So we went in without any costs, and for 2 years we were in this office, and that project never came. So I was rent-free for 2 years in that office.
No.
That gave us the opportunity to grow.
Incredible. So then it's just like we need to get more projects in,
exactly.
and then as the work comes in, you get more guys in. Okay.
Yeah.
And at what? So obviously, like Kiska is synonymous with KTM, for example.
Mm.
At what point do you meet Stefan Pira and you guys?
Again, two lucky shots at one. From a previous engagement as an intern in a design studio, I knew the head of R&D in KTM. So I gave the guy a call, and I said, you know what, I've made myself independent, so if there's any need for design in your company, I would be interested to show you what we can do. And he said, lucky that you called today, because you know that at the moment there's a design competition running. Our board has asked a few design studios to make a presentation. You better call them. Maybe you can join the action. So I called the CEO, and it was a lady at the time. She said, yeah, but no different conditions. I said, I don't mind. I work for the same conditions as everyone else. So I went out, got the brief, won the contest.
Wow.
That was a start.
And so where does he fit in? Does he come along later, or?
He came along later. So
Okay.
for the first year, I worked for KTM before the bankruptcy under the old management. And meanwhile, I got introduced to Mr. Pira because he was in a very different business at the time. He was in a ski binding business. And he has bought a ski binding patent and had a small group of engineers, and they're developing this thing further. And we were working at the time for a ski binding company in France, Look. And the CEO of Look, who was Austrian, by the way, called me one day and said, you know, I know that you're working on a project for us, but I would want to postpone it a little bit, because I've met an Austrian guy, who has a very interesting patent. And I think this could be the perfect basis for our common project. The thing is just that it's completely ugly. And I would want to bring this guy to you, and you would tell us whether you can do it better or not. So he brought Mr. Pira to my office.
Wow.
And Pira already asked the design studio in Munich to do the design for the thing. So it was already done. And he said, this doesn't look very, very sporty and not dynamic, and I think this is what it needs. And we would do a different proposal. I said, if you can do better, I don't mind. Huh? So we did, and then we were in the game.
Wow.
Stefan's idea, or Stefan Pier's idea at the time, was to deliver a base technology for all ski manufacturers, to give them the possibility to ramp up their system from a single ski manufacturer to a system producer. So at the late summer day, he invited the whole, would say, Swiss and Austrian ski industry into a hotel in Munich and presented them the idea of having a common technical basis, but we would do a different design for each brand. And instead of jumping onto this idea, they started to fight each other. So it was a disaster. The whole thing was an absolute mess. He was super frustrated, and we went for a beer in a beer garden in Munich that night. And me working at the time for 1 year for KTM also has brought me in that difficult situation, because it smelled already like bankruptcy. So they started to not pay the bills anymore, and the orders came very late and not in the format that we have been discussing before. So I was quite nervous about the situation, because it was a big project for us, and not getting paid was definitely a threat. So, and in order to somehow motivate him that he's not the only guy in the world that has just came out of a disaster, I told him that I'm in a similar disaster than him, because I'm also at risk with one of my biggest projects, and just wanted to tell him, you're not alone in a common ground. So he took that, fine, but 2-3 weeks later, he gave me a call, and he said, this KTM story, I don't get it out of my head. And do you know the most important importers of that company in the different countries? And would you know someone from inside who could bring us a more clear picture about the real situation? And I said, the importers I know. And I called them. A few of them I would definitely bring to the table, I'm pretty sure. So a couple of weeks later, we all met at the small hotel near Passau in Germany. The Dutch importer, the Italian importer, the German importer, and the head of sales of KTM, who just was a little bit hesitant to join that meeting, because he said, for bringing interners to a foreign person probably is illegal. You could go into jail. And I said, or become a hero. Yeah, that's up to you.
Brilliant.
So he took the invitation, and then we met there. And I think in that afternoon, Mr. Pierre decided if there's a chance to take this company over, he would grab it. A few weeks later, the company filed bankruptcy shortly before Christmas. And then in between Christmas and New Year, where everyone else was on holidays, Mr. Pierre worked together with his lawyers on a proposal, showed it to I don't know what the English term for the lawyer who is responsible for what comes after bankruptcy.
Okay, yeah.
And they met the guy, and he put the proposal on the table that he would start at the 2nd of January with a limited amount of people, but having people in all different departments, just shrinking the whole thing and giving the whole thing a restart. And the guy said, fine. There is no one else bidding, so you get it.
Wow. And that's the start of it. And you were
I was then in the pole position, because first of all, I was already working for them. We have proven that we can do motorcycles because we won the competition, and I brought him to the company.
And you facilitated the deal. Brilliant. That's such a great, we were talking about luck earlier on, and there's a great quote, and I can't remember if it's Thomas Edison or Alexander Graham Bell, but he says that success is not an accident, it's what happens when preparation meets opportunity.
Exactly.
And this is such a absolutely true quote. You do need these lucky moments, but if you haven't done the work and if you're not prepared, then it means nothing. Right?
Exactly.
Absolutely fascinating. So what sort of time is this? Is this early 90s?
91, 92.
91, 92. Just to go back a second, I don't want to throw you off course, but how you grew up in Salzburg?
No, I grew up in Upper Austria.
Okay.
So in between Vienna and Salzburg, just in the middle.
Okay.
Industrial area. Not as pretty as Salzburg.
and is it still pretty industrial now? Or?
It is still pretty industrial.
Okay. Okay. So how did you get to this realization as a child not a child, but a teenager in the 80s or late 70s that you want to become a designer? Because I imagine there weren't a lot of industrial designers or...
Nothing. I never met anyone like that before. But then there was a TV show and I don't know, kind of a game on TV. And one of the participants was a designer, and everyone had to explain what he does as a profession. And he said that he's an industrial designer, and then the guy who was running the show got a little bit more interested and said, that's interesting, and what is it about? So can you tell us a little bit more about what are you actually doing? What kind of talent do you need? And how is the whole thing? How does that work? So he gave a very brief explanation of the education and the job as is. And I sat in front of TV and I said, that ticks all my boxes. Sounds fantastic, yeah? Modeling, painting, drawing, thinking, that's great. I never knew that a job like that existed. I was already frightening to death. It was around 16, 17 that I had no idea of what to do. Later on, after the high school or after college, and I thought, my God, sooner or later I need to get an idea what to do in my life. And then suddenly there is this, and I thought, bang, that's it.
So and then do a bit of research to find out where the schools are and all that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
And what did your parents say when you went to them and said, I'm going to become an industrial designer?
My father liked it because, my father was very forward-thinking, thanks to the time that he has spent in America after the Second World War, because he was a prisoner of war and was for a couple of years in America.
Oh, wow.
And the Americans treated the German prisoners not like prisoners. He was working as a waiter in a hotel, so he was in a normal American life. They just had a PW sign on the sleeve. That was the only difference to Americans working on.
Wow. So treated pretty well.
So treated pretty well. Yeah. And so as he lived the normal American lifestyle, he understood how far America has been developed compared to Germany at that point of time. So he was always forward-thinking. He then, after the Second World War, worked for an American business consultancy because he spoke fluently English. And so he was always forward-thinking and always interested in new things. And when he got to hear about the job, he thought that might be something that counts in the future. Yeah, why not try?
Wow, that's awesome. And your mom, what was she also pretty supportive?
Oh, my mom was always thinking that I will have to marry a rich woman to survive,
Because she just didn't have any hope, no?
No, because I was such a mom kid that was unbelievable even at that age, and because it was comfortable. And she thought that it has to be like that because I'm completely
mommy's boy.
Yeah, and completely how should I say,
reliant
on someone to treat me well, but it was just laziness, and she did it, so therefore I just took it.
Absolutely incredible. It's great. Like I people from your era, like when you speak to parents, like post-war. Yeah. You speak about their experience with their parents. It's weird. They either like super, super conservative, or they have the point of view of like, screw it. This is like, life can be over tomorrow. Mm-hmm. If you want to go for it, you need to be progressive and you need to move forward. And it's great that you obviously had a pretty progressive thinking father, at least. And wow. So, Gerald, with the start of KTM, this new rebirth under Mr. Pira and your like amalgamation with him, was there complication in setting up the arrangement between the two of you, or was
it because we never had one?
Okay, so it was kind of done on a handshake, old school. Wow. And it was all completely open. That was understanding that you were going to carry on getting other clients and whatnot.
He was busy building KTM to the size it has today, so he never spent any minute on what it would need to integrate design into their company, any kind of design. because he has chucked on our table whatever he wanted to be design styled or thought through. From communication to booth building to shop design, whatever had to be done, he's just chucked it on our table. Whether we were prepared or able or experienced, he didn't care. This is Gerald. He takes care. So we were always busy in developing our company alongside. So yes, we were moaning about his advertising agency because they completely didn't understand what the brand was about. And then at a certain moment of time, he turned around and said, just moaning is not enough. If you can do better, then show it. So we had one graphic designer at the time, and I said, Tom, now we have a chance, huh? Let's do it. And we have changed the style of how to communicate motorcycling completely for the whole branch, basically, because at that point of time, motorcycles have been shot in a studio, stand still, and the headline was maybe something about the technical data. And we showed motorcycles in action. So our first brochure that we showed him was an off-road brochure, enduro brochure, and it was a two-pager, but foldable, so there were 4 pages when you unfold it. And the inner side was just one picture, a motorcycle go through a river. The motorcycle was here, and the rest was just water coming out from the rear wheel.
I love that. I love that.
And he immediately got it. Yeah, he said, "Yeah, it's about the application. It's clear. Now do it." I said, "Hey, come on, you're joking, huh? That program that you have already at the time, because it was end of 90s. I have one graphic designer." I said, "Yeah, that is not my problem."
So what did you do?
I hired a couple guys.
You put an advert out and finding around. Incredible. So, Gerald, one of the things that is quite apparent, it seems like from an early stage in your career, you had a very good sense of being able to zoom out and have an overview. And I think and what I mean by that is a lot of designers have the tendency to get fixated on details. And details are very, very important. Mm-hmm. But you can get sucked into those details to the point that you don't see the bigger picture. And you clearly not only saw the bigger picture in design, but of the whole business.
Hard learning.
Where does that come from?
You always meet the right people at the right point of time. So it was around that time, mid-90s, and we were asked to do a wagon for Austrian Railway, a big one. Double layer, so a huge thing. And we were, 7, 8 people at the time. So it was a massive, massive project. And we were dealing with the CEO of the Austrian Railways, so at the highest floor, so to say, because he was interested in design and he wanted to get the things done right. And at that moment, he also introduced me to his design advisor. And I thought, my God, huh? An old guy, architect, stubborn like hell, drove me crazy. And I was fighting with that guy for, I think, the whole project, 3/4 of a year. And then there was a final presentation in Vienna at the Siemens factory, big building with just one wagon inside. But there was a second floor with windows, and you could move up to the second floor, which was actually the 4th floor because it was a high hall. And the guy pulled me at my sleeve and said, "Let's walk up." So we went up to the 4th floor and had a look. And he said, "And? Happy? Satisfied?" I said, "Yeah. From here it looks pretty good." He said, "What do you think why you have glasses? Because you're too much in the detail."
Wow.
And that was the thing that I finally took with me from that project. That most of the fights were unnecessary because I didn't have the distance. And suddenly I understood his comments and why we were disagreeing in so many aspects, because he had the distance I hadn't. And that was a key learning for me.
Therein lies a lesson as well. When somebody gives you the right advice at the right time, you've got to be receptive enough to take it on board. And that's a whole other discussion. And it's pretty impressive that you did listen in this moment, because
I had no choice. It was just him and me.
Well, you were scared he was going to throw you out the window. My God! Wow. And so then you've now established Kiska as did you have like this big grand vision?
No. To be honest, I just wanted to have fun in my life. Yes, that was basically the major driver. And what's more fun for a designer than to design things?
Yes.
So,
yeah.
What I've learned before Kiska, when I worked in Porsche design, that was very one-dimensional, because it's an author design a company, and they do the same thing again and again, despite whom they work for.
Yeah.
It always looks the same because it's their style. And I thought, my God, design can do a lot more, because you can create a style for each individual brand.
Yes.
That belongs then to them. It's not a loan that a designer gives to the company, or something that they borrow from him. It is theirs. Designer is able to create a brand from top to toe in all aspects, if he gets the freedom to do that, and it really shapes the brand, and it's then really uncomparable and differentiated to everything else in the world. And that was motivation, so to say.
Okay.
To experience what design can do in that aspect.
So hence your saying of we don't design Kiska style, we do it the Kiska way.
Yes.
And that means basically that we are not going to have our certain accents or anything.
Exactly.
We've got certain principles that we adhere to, and ultimately we want to develop something for you.
What we have done for KTM and Husqvarna,
Yes.
that are both based on the same platform, is a good example, because they share 80% of the mechanical parts, but the look and feel, the whole experience, the rider's experience is completely different. And this is what design can do.
It's mind-blowing, yeah. It's absolutely mind-blowing. Gerald, on that subject, with regard to giving a brand its own language, we living in a time now where design has almost become kind of cheap, because there's an abundance of people that can do it to a pretty high level. Obviously, you guys are sitting in a pretty premium position in terms of the last 20, 30, however many years. It's coming up for 30 years, I imagine. And so, you've established yourself and whatnot. And I just, how would somebody go about trying to convince a company that doesn't have a clue about design that if you give us enough time and a budget, we'll be able to create this for you? How, like this is a really, really difficult thing.
I I also gave lessons at design schools, and I also established one design school in Graz, and in the last term I had one lesson that I gave to them that was about design entrepreneurship, and they all asked me, should we make ourselves independent right after university, or what's your advice? Should we go into a studio, and if so, which one? And I said, if you really want to be self-employed, make a proof. Yeah, but how? I said, find a client. Because this is an underestimated thing. You have to be able to connect to business people. If you're not able to do that, you better work as an employed designer in a studio. Because this ability to talk in a foreign language, to understand that they are motivated and driven by other things than you, that you can be a facilitator and a multiplier to them. Yes, but in order to be accepted as a sparring partner, you have to be able to speak their language. And to think in their way, not in a designer's way. And I think this is the ability that you need to have in order to build a design company. If you're weak on that, success is difficult. Because it's a symbiosis, you always need a client. And if the client does not really trust you, and where does trust come from? You could say from results, yes. But first of all, it's a personal thing. Trust is built up in between two people. And I think my strongest talent probably is not on the design side. It's on the visionary side, to give someone an idea what he could achieve and how, and do this in a way that people really trust you and believe in you, and then overstep that thing that was holding them back so far and say, yeah, let's give it a try.
But are you, and that's also where your thing is of like, it's one thing having an idea, but more than anything, courage is the most important.
Yes.
So when you are speaking to somebody, a business person, for example, about like, this is where we could go, you obviously not crippled by like how we're going to execute. You kind of say like, this is what we could do, and then you reverse engineer it.
To be honest, I never talk about design when I meet a business person at the first moment. And this is what makes them surprised, because I usually ask them a simple question: can you explain me your business? Because then we are immediately in the business talk, and I get to understand what his problems are. And then I can backcast and say, fine, would we have a solution for one of his problems? And if I have an idea how we could solve the one or the other, then let's talk about the possible solution to one of the problems you've just told me. And then you're in the game.
Wow. That is very powerful, because that's not something that comes natural to most designers.
No.
They already like got a preconceived idea of like, I would love to be able to do this.
Yes, exactly. It's about them.
Yes.
But it's not creating success. It's about the other side, it's about your client.
What is your stance on, you mentioned earlier on about kids saying like, to be independent, should I go and work for myself, or should I go and work for an OEM? What is your stance on getting some experience first in an OEM versus being independent?
It's a fundamental different world. It doesn't have to do much with each other. Because I always say they live in a bubble and we live in the real world. And the real world means to be responsible for yourself and accountable for what you do, and as well accountable for what you don't do. And this brings a fundamental different pressure, or let me say weight, on everyone's shoulder, because if you don't perform, the money will not come. If you don't perform in a studio, in a car company, the worst thing that can happen to you is that you lose your job. My worst thing that I go bankrupt and I lose my house and my everything. And this is a fundamental different motivation to do the things right.
Along with all the other people that are relying on you. Wow.
So this money thing that most of designers do not want to talk about or think about, for us, especially for me, it was a fundamental motivation, so to say, to live the life of an adult. Because if you take the money out of the game, you live the life of a child, because someone else takes care of you. As soon as you want to be responsible for yourself, the money is a part of your life that you cannot avoid. And it makes everyone in here a little bit more grown up, because everyone feels that if the company doesn't perform, we have a problem. This is not like a car company. When I'm not motivated on Wednesday, maybe I do it on Thursday. This is unfair, because they also have challenges and they also have pressure, but not everyone. In here, I would say everyone feels the pressure, because if he don't perform, his colleagues will tell him that he better takes his feet in his hands. Yeah.
In terms of skill set, though, in terms of learning like your craft, and because from the sounds of things, those formative experience at Porsche, and there was another place called Orange.
Form Orange, yeah.
Form Orange, and there was a third place as well.
Interform Design.
Interform.
Yeah.
Those experiences, because you were working for roughly 6 years in total as an employee.
Yeah. Yes.
And obviously you built up some contacts, but also I think more importantly, you understood from this experience how to what the role of a professional designer is.
Yes.
How important do you think that was to
be honest, it was super important for me, because I moved into 3 different studios that had a fundamental different focus. And I learned 3 different ways to run a design studio, or to have a different thing that you are going to sell. Because, let me say, From Orange was very much engineering driven, because the owner was an engineer. And he was basically focusing on innovation. Porsche Design was, as I said, an auto design studio, but the first real international company I worked for. That was, for me, the most important things, the flights to Asia and to America, and to deal with international clients. This is what I've learned there. But the most important thing that I've learned in Porsche Design is that their budget is not a limit, because when you can afford Porsche Design, you can afford everyone. And that people were willing to spend that amount of money showed me that the budgets, the other 2 studios that I worked before, they just didn't take the full advantage of having something to sell that is of a value that makes people opening their wallet and put the money on the table.
Okay.
And that was the thing that I took with me, and I said, fine, if I make myself independent, I can do myself one favor, ask for enough money to do things good. Because that was the fundamental difference that I've learned in Porsche Design. You know, designers are always under pressure. Whether you have 2 weeks for a concept or 6 weeks for a concept, it always feels like the same pressure, but it isn't. Because having 6 weeks for the same challenge or for the same task gives you the possibility to do the details also proper. And in Porsche Design, I've learned that a product, even a box, has 6 sides and not just 5. So there we had the time to do every detail, also the ones that you don't see.
Right.
And that gives a quality to products that makes them standing out. And you have to get that freedom to do that. And the freedom that buys you that is the budget you get. So I was quite, I would say, as a freshman, I was quite tough when it came to pricing. And that was new in Austria, because usually it was the other way around. Yeah, people told you how much budget they have and if you want to do it for that. And I said, yeah, no, come on, you're just a beginner. I said, yeah, fine, but sorry, I can't do it for that money, proper. And if someone else can do, I would want to know that guy. So what you will get is something not as good as it can be. And for me, this is not an option. I wonder it's an option for you.
Amazing.
So that was the story. And to be honest, yeah, you always get the chance, you know. I would say in 90% of the cases, you get a chance.
But you have to be able to communicate what you've just said.
Yes.
Do you have any advice on communication?
You know, pressure helps. So to pay the salaries every month, to be able to do that, to be able to do the investments, to run the company, to grow the company, is a certain pressure. Pressure helps, because pressure makes you focusing. Pressure leaves the bullshit away. Pressure,
Perspective,
yeah,
yes.
Exactly. You know, it comes to what's really important, what matters, what counts, and you focus on this, and that's the secret. So I think there is no progress without pressure.
Wow. You have another saying as well, that design enough, or product design enough product design on its own is not enough to ensure the success of a business.
Yes.
But you need brand.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
You know, I give you a good example. When you buy a chair from Philipp Stark, you buy a Philipp Stark chair. It doesn't matter who produced it. He worked for so many chair companies that you get completely confused. So when you get into a shop that sells chairs of that quality, you would rather go for a Stark chair than for a chair from Cartel. So, and this is what the brand can do. In this case, Stark is the brand and not the producer. The brand gives the value. And the brand filled up with the right content and the right communication and the right culture and the right everything. Because a brand is not just built by products. It's also built by it appears in the public, on social media, in real life, how it's perceived is not just how the product performs. It is everything. It's the whole appearance of the company in every detail and every aspect. How people are dressed, how the booth looks like, how it's placed in the shop. The communication, how is the brochure, what kind of information do I get from their website? Is it speaking the same language, talking about the same values, expressing the same experience to me?
So what would some of the things be that, like a designer starting out, if they were to branch out on their own, what are some of the things that they could focus on without a budget or with a limited budget to have brand in mind?
Meanwhile, we have the luxury to be in a position when we have the first talk to a company that comes to us and asks us whether we could do a design for them, to analyze if their biggest problem is the product. Because sometimes it's something else. And then we would say, fine, yes, we could do the product for us, but if I would be you, I would spend my money on something else. And then we can make him a proposal how to strengthen his brand, probably over advertising or over web appearance or what have you, because it would do more for his brand and for his financial success than designing the product in a different way, because he does not have the right ability to communicate that, or it's something hidden by anything else that he does wrong. So therefore, it's camouflaged by other things. And that ability to have also the quality in the house to help on many different things and not just on the one, is the luxury that we have built for ourselves over that amount of time. Fine, not every design studio does that. Not every design studio has that focus. So, but if people want to do that, I would say join us for a couple of years and learn how to do it.
Do you have any issues with people basically doing that? I mean, what is your stance on an employee joining a company, spending a period of time and then going, actually, I want to go off and do my own thing?
We had a few, some successful, some not. To be honest, it makes me proud. Yeah, if someone else can do the same thing again, he has learned it here, and what better can happen in life that a proof that what you have thought is not just what you can do and what you think, but when others do the same and multiply that, it's a proof of your system, of your idea. There is so much work in the world for designers that if someone else does a similar thing, there's still enough left for us.
That is a very unique perspective, Gerald. I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yeah, but it's true. I mean, we cannot take on every job that's offered. So therefore, and we also have limits in growth because we can't find the people and bring them all here. That's the reason why we opened more than this studio. In order to spread our wings in places where it's a little bit easier to find new people and new talent. So there are always limits to your growth or to your size. So the worst thing is therefore not the competition made by our own former employees.
You don't strike me as the kind of person that easily gets overwhelmed. And I was going to ask you if you've ever been concerned about getting too big. Is that ever been in?
Many times, because when a company grows, it has to change its basic, or let me say, its structure, its processes. Also, people will have to change, and there are certain boundaries. So when I reached the size of 15, 16, it was still a one guy directs everything kind of thing, but we couldn't move forward. It was the limiter. So in order to overstep 20, I had to, first time in my life, change the system in which we work. It was not just me giving direction. We needed to split the teams in two. Each team needed a director, and it was the first hard learning, because I wasn't aware that this will ever happen, because in my naive fantasy at the time, I was directing everything. Yeah. But I would say beyond 10, 12, if you're really good people, it just stresses you out. The quality drops and you just burn yourself. So that was the first learning. And then we were in a similar situation when we were around 50 and then 100. We stepped 4 times back from 100, 507 to 90 because we completely exploded. And we did not have any idea how to get bigger than 100 because we had to change the whole thing again. So at that moment when we struggled overstepping one mark, we always hired a business consultant. Carefully selected for the right size, people that had already experience with organizations at that size and that joined us for a couple of weeks in order to understand what was our problem, and then helping us to bridge that and overcome it, and that we had, as I said, several times in these 30 years. And the 100 was the most bitter one, because we got so many opportunities at that time to grow, and we simply were not able to overstep that number.
Because of the pace, or because you couldn't find the people?
No, because we at a certain moment of time, a company has to change from multi-talented people to single-talented people. It means from people that can do everything a bit to people that can do one thing best.
Right.
And that we did not have on our radar. We thought that with people that have 5 talents and did a little bit of design, a little bit of engineering, and a little bit of project management, and a little bit of account management, we could grow further. But these multi-talents are super rare. So you also cannot multiply them, because you do not have the talents in-house that would be able to jump on it, and also not the ones that want it. Because most of the designers want to be good in one thing. So that was the hardest learning, that in order to grow further, we had to switch to a specialist setup. And that was also the moment of time where people were no longer responsible for one project from A to Z. That was the moment where real teamwork started, because as everyone is a specialist for a certain period in that project, be it concept, be it detailing, be it CAD, be it whatever, color and trim, what have you, it suddenly turned from a it's me, my project, my product kind of thing into a this is ours. And that changed the whole culture in the company, because first of all, not everyone wanted that. People were afraid that they lose impact or influence when they step back and focus on one thing. They liked it so much to do everything to 50%, but nothing to 100. So it was the biggest change in the history of the company. And that was also the reason why we struggled so hard to overcome this number, because we didn't have that on the radar. It needed an outsider to come in, see that after a couple of days and say the way in which you work is no longer appropriate to the size of the company. I'm sorry. Some very hard learnings, at the size of 15, I also hired an expert from outside. And he said, fine, I'll stay a couple of days in your company and I will come back with an analysis. And I said, yeah, fine, do that. So he started Monday and I was already Wednesday. I couldn't wait any longer. And he said, give me another day. And then Thursday we sat together and he said, you have a brilliant company, you have one problem. I said, tell me. He said, the boss.
And how did you take that?
Oh, at that moment, not good. But then later on, when he explained me what he saw, and it was pretty clear that I was the limit.
So up until that point, you did have an issue with letting go.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
And what did it take him in this moment for you to realize again?
Just examples. He followed me for a day. He just was writing down what he saw, and he said, and then there was this moment. And is this really your task to do that? And here, did he have enough time to understand the problem? I don't think so, because you frustrated the guy completely because he had thought it through, and you just at one glance gave him an advice that was completely inappropriate. So are you sure that you're doing the right thing? Wow. And I thought, yeah, fine, he's right there, he's right there, he's right there. Yeah, damn shit, he's right.
Jesus. But I think at the end of the day, you are in this moment forced to really evaluate, is this guy being accurate or not? Because in a bigger company, as you're saying, in a bigger corporation where you're getting your monthly salary, you can just say, don't give a shit. You are wrong, and that's it. But you are really, when you say it, you talk about this weight that you feel, you have to really go, is this the right thing?
I had a wake-up call couple years after the start. We were around 6-7 people, and it was exactly the size that I wanted to have because it was very comfortable. I had I could oversee everything. I could direct everything. For me, it was the right thing. And then within a couple weeks of the 6 guys, 4 quit.
Wow.
With the same explanation. I said, Gerald, there is no progress anymore. You seem to be in early retirement. This is maybe you feel comfortable with it, but we don't. We want to go further. So I sat there with 2 people having worked for 7, and I thought, oh my God, what I'm going to do now? And then I got the book of Hartmut Esslinger into my hands. It's one of his first books about frog design, and there was one sentence on page, 112 or so, where he says, in order to keep people in your company, the development speed of the company has to be slightly higher than the development speed of your people. And I thought, yeah, he's probably right, but that forces me to grow. And that was then a decision I had to take. Do I want that? But I said, fine, what kind of choices do I have? To rehire or to change the team every 3 years because they get bored? This is a certain amount of stress. Because
there's a business model that exists like that.
Yes.
A lot of OEMs adopt that. We'll get them in cheap.
But it's super stressful. It is. It's to find the next 4 or 5 people. It stresses you out for months, and you can never be sure if you replace the talent that left the company with the right talent. Can you find similar good people? Can you find the ones that fit the team? Can you find them in time? For sure not, because the ones are going to leave soon and the other ones are somewhere, hard to find. So you bring yourself in a situation that I didn't want to have a second time in my life. So there was no choice.
Unreal. I was going to ask you on your stance not on your stance, but how you've been able to stay on top of everything. So,
didn't. Short answer, I didn't.
But not so much, not necessarily of the day-to-day running of the business, but just you are clearly still very switched on with regard to all the things you've talked about, brand, innovation, and all that sort of stuff. Along with that comes technology, which, by the way, today has got very complicated and continues to get more complex. Mm-hmm. And I was going to ask you a little bit about how you've managed to evolve with that.
I'm curiosity. I'm very curious, and that helps because you get to know about technology before you would need it, probably, because you read about it and think, my God, once this is affordable, we could do this and that with it. So it was the same from the very start. I think we were the first company in Austria that had a 3D printer some 25 years ago.
25 years ago?
Yes. We bought one of the first machines that was ever developed. Because I thought, that's brilliant, to do a model overnight. I mean, this is game changer.
Which I guess is a perfect segue into the question of reinvesting in your business rather than taking it out and buying another 911. What is your advice on that?
I had many points of time where I had to make that choice. I think a couple years after the start, maybe 3-4 years after the start, you could, if you Google, you will find the right year. because it was the year when Jurassic Park came out.
Yes.
And I was completely blown away by the detailing quality of these virtual figures in that movie. And then I was trying to find more about it, and I realized that it's built with a software called Alias Wavefront, and it is not completely built for that purpose, but they made it work, and that gave them the opportunity to make these brilliant details and all the moves. And I said, I need to find more out about that. So we were already fantasizing with 3D CAD systems at the time, but everything that you could buy in the early 90s was just crap.
And expensive.
Yes.
Expensive crap.
They are not comparable in terms of price to Alias Wavefront, because when I got to hear what the license would cost and what kind of machine you would need to buy and what kind of a printer you would need to have in order to get the quality out, I thought, my God, this is not one 911, this is 4 911s. And then I said, yeah, fine, I will have to find a reason to buy that. So we asked the distributor of that software in Austria to do one project for us. Give us one guy for a couple of weeks and a machine and equipment, and we would have to test. And if the test would be successful, I would buy it. And I thought, fine, I have one company that always wants to bring their products out sooner than they are able to. So if we could provide them photorealistic renderings of their machines a year before they have them in production, they could make so much money in selling them already, because they're complicated to install, needs a lot of preparation on the installation side. So it would definitely help them. So we made this. I came to the CEO and I said, how about this? He was blown away. He said, how did you do that? I said, you can have that for everything that we do for you 1 year before you have it in production. How about that? He said, how much? I told him what the thing would cost. He said, done. That was it.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Gerald, I think we probably need to wrap up fairly soon because everybody's busy and whatnot. But before you go, we've talked about all these different things, and one of the themes that you've talked about that was kind of born out of necessity is your ability to zoom out and let go a little bit. So on the subject of that, if you were talking to a young person that's starting out and they say they want to be independent, what would you say the key things are that they should focus on? Like, because with the cliche of designers wanting to hone in and perfect the art of the perfect body side, at what point is it good to step away and say, maybe I should work on my communication and various other things?
I think what you have to be clear about, but this is not just for designers, this is for every profession. You have to be clear about what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. And most of the problems that we have to deal with people come from a certain delta in between what they think they are good in and what we think they are good in, or what their surrounding thinks they are good in. And this ability to self-reflect and really focus on what suits you, what is your real talent, and not what you want to do, but just because you want, not because you are talented for it, is the key. And I have seen a lot of, I was teaching design for many, many years, and people came to me, usually they have a job before they leave university. If they are halfway talented, they have already an opportunity to start here or there. And they came to me and they said, I have these 2 job offers, which one would you prefer me to take? And I went through every of those things with them and said, fine, what do you see here? What do you see there? What are you think suits you better and why? And we had a lot of different opinions because people wanted to do that. One said, I want to work in a car design studio. I said, you will never become a car designer. It's as hard as it sounds. They will always let you do lights. Yeah. But do you want to be a light designer for the rest of your life? No, I want to have the opportunity. And I can make my way up. I said, no, sorry, you will get to see talents of a fundamental different league. So don't do that. Go in a product design studio, could be the superstar there. Some followed the advice, some didn't. Some got happy, some not.
Well, the people get seduced by the brand, right?
Yes, and by an opportunity that is theoretical but not real, because when you are not an absolute genius in three-dimensional thinking and drawing, no one will hire you as an exterior designer. I'm sorry, this is a rare talent. Yeah, you know that, and if you're not at that level, sorry, there is no real job opportunity for you. You can work in the studio, yes, but you will do other things than what you dream about.
That's very powerful advice. It's very, very good. I mean, but that's the art of self-reflection, and that's a very difficult thing. It's a very, very difficult thing.
Yes.
Gerald, the last question that I want to ask you is, when I step into this building, and it's been a couple of times now, and I've been in a few design studios, the energy in here is absolutely, it's so inspiring. You know, I find myself at times becoming quite jaded with the industry and you know, at times a little bit bored. And you think, like, what would the perfect place look like? And I mean, the perfect place doesn't exist. But when you step in here, there's all these different things going on. I mean, you guys have got bike design, you're doing car design, there are skis and stand-up paddle boards and trainers and microphones, and the list goes on and on and on. What is very obvious to me as well, apart from this amazing setting, is it's a lifestyle that is married to this job.
Yeah.
And you guys clearly place an importance on that. Has that something that's happened out of necessity, or have you always been pro go and recharge your batteries? And
I think a lot of it comes from satisfaction, and the way in which you get satisfied. And we always preach to the designers that they should not be happy with a wonderful sketch. They should be satisfied when the product in the supermarket or wherever it's going to be sold looks the way they wanted it to look. So feel yourself accountable for the end state, for the final thing, because that gives you the energy to jump on it very lately on the process, when some engineers thinks he can make a shortcut here and there and just do it different, to interfere and say, no. Some people say, but that was not in my hands, it was not under my control. I said, yeah, fine, even if you don't get paid for it, you have to have that reserve in your budget that at any point of time in the process of industrialization, you can jump in and say, guys, sorry, no, it's not the way it has to be done. And that kind of, let me say, accountability as a moving or as a leading principle, I think brings a certain energy, because people never stop following on their projects. It's not the one I've done last week and now I get the next one. No, as long as this product is not out in the market, or as long as the campaign is not out, or whatever we do, people feel responsible for the end state. And this brings a certain tension, because there's not always the one project that is in front of me. There are the three that have already passed my table, but I still have to watch them somehow in order to avoid that it's going wrong at the very last moment. And I think this brings a certain, how should I say, tension, as I said, and also a certain open-mindedness that people have to be aware that there is more than the thing that is in front of them. Once you get this, let me say, eagerness or curiosity into everyone's head, they also start to be curious about what the other services do, and how is my product going to be communicated? What kind of campaign idea is behind? Does it really reflect what we had in mind when we starting designing the project? So this communication in between the services, that and later on also the communication designers see the value of talking to the product designer first to figure out what was the driving idea, what is key, what is the thing that we really have to capture. This is something that brings a certain energy. It's not an isolated job. It's not just the one thing that I'm responsible for. I'm involved in so many different things, and I get asked, and I get also a part of the responsibility for other things, and this is pure energy.
Sorry, before I forget, I know this is going to be completely unrelated to what we've talked now, but so many people have asked about the KTM Orange. I know it's not necessarily the best thing to end off on, but it's an important question that a lot of people wanted to know.
Long story?
Long as you want.
When I started the design studio, I had a friend, Mark Douglas Clark. He was designing BMW in Munich at the M GmbH. They did this set one and stuff like that. And he was presenting at IAA an electric car that he has done in 1991.
Wow.
First electric study from BMW presented at IAA. And that car was painted orange. A very flashy orange with some pearl effect in it. And I called him and said, Mark, you have to give me the recipe of this color. It's brilliant. Orange was completely out at that time. Yeah. It was strong in the 70s, where Porsche and BMW 2002 Tii
yes.
were painted in orange, and then it disappeared for about a decade. And then suddenly on IAA, I saw this orange car, and it was really bang. I wanted to know the code of that color because I wanted to paint Mr. Pira's key binding in orange. So we did that. And then about a year later, we did this first motorcycles for him, and it was a weird year because he wanted to present the whole fleet basically in a new design. We were just a handful of people, and we teamed up with a big modeling studio in order to be able to do all that. And that one long night in this modeling studio, the head of development in KTM and myself, we had a beer. I don't know, 9 o'clock in the evening. We were left, no one else was there anymore. And we were discussing that there's a new fashion coming up in France. It was called supermotard, where people have turned former motocross bikes or enduro bikes into super city racers with 17-inch wheels and fat tires and so on. And we said, it's sad that there is no company out there that produces such a thing that you can buy from shelf. And I said, we have just one in front of us. You know, if you would turn this enduro into such a thing, it would have the right size, the right engine, not these fancy two-stroke things that will not run for a long period of time, but there's a proper four-stroke engine. But it's still light, still strong. That could be an ideal basis. And then we were discussing how it would have to look. It was already in fiberglass. And I said, I took tape. And I said, we would have to cut this here, and we would have to shorten the tail, and we would have to lift the spoilers, and it would need a short front fender and so on. And we just taped around. And meanwhile, he started to get a saw or a flex or something to cut the thing in pieces. I said, are you mad? I said, yeah, we have spare parts. We can cut one down just to have a look how it looks. So at that very night, we cut the whole thing at very different things, and then what came out was the first KTM Duke.
Wow.
And it was so good, or we thought it was so good, that we have to present it to the management. So we had a presentation date already in mind, and he said, well, we need to paint the thing. We cannot just show it in fiberglass. We have to find a color. I said, I have the right color.
Oh, brilliant.
So that was the invention of the orange for KTM.
Wow. That's mind-blowing. There was also, I had heard all sorts of stuff about it. It was the orange from the mountains and the sunrise in the Alps.
Marketing.
And all sorts of
marketing.
Brilliant.
You asked me for deep insights.
No, that's real. That's truth. That's unfiltered. So that was great, Gerald. It's it really has been an absolute honor speaking to you, being able to hear all these different things from your design philosophies, your business insights as well. This is something it's a first for me and for this channel on this such an insane level. I understand so much more about why this business has grown into what it is, and why somebody would want to come to Kiska. Because it's an oversimplification to just go, well, it's everything under one roof. There's a bunch of companies that sell everything under one roof. But you guys really have everything that you do is not only a team of specialists in various different areas, but everything is synergized as well. And I'm so happy and glad to have met you and to be able to sit with you directly in person, not over the stupid internet. And thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. Welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.